Green Before Green, and with Penny McCann from Before Me. We should have online also Rowena Potts from Memorabilia, and the director Azad, I forgot her last name, but from Iran, from Archive of Cracks. They are not here, so we should not be concerned with that. They might appear at one point. Okay, so I would like to start. Your films are very personal, but also there is a concern with the aesthetics, with image making, with but also how we retrieve memories and how we understand the past through images. There's also this idea of the fragmentary, of how we piece together bits and pieces from the past, and how we piece them to understand something about it. So if you want to address this relationship between the personal and maybe the aesthetics, the image making, the fragments, yeah, whatever you would like to address, whatever speaks to you from this question.
Sure, Paul, I'll start. To answer your question, I think, this is the first time I've seen it in a like with an audience, and seeing it and seeing all the other work around it, it was a wonderful program. And I think, okay, how my approach and talking about the personal and sort of the archive in this case. And I think what I see is a film that's very it's mannered and it's cautious in a way that kind of surprised me, not having seen it for a while. And I think that's like that for many reasons. And I think because I'm working at revealing something that's in the distant past, and also I'm also personally sort of trepidatious of what I might find, because it is about my mother. It's about her story and telling her story. And I think even now I'm uncertain of what of this journey that I went on. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally. I mean, it will unfold as time goes by, probably, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, my mother's been gone 20 years. So I still, when I see it now, I think, okay, it's still she lingers, which is very interesting to me on a personal level, but it also is at a remove. And I think that Before Me shows that kind of remove in terms of history, in terms of memory, in terms of my reaching towards her.
Yeah, in terms of the distance that is felt, but also the willing to reach something from it, to grasp it. The final image in your film is so wonderful, like those archives that fly away in the distance. I don't know, it's very evoking to that, to what you're saying now. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so it's quite simple. I probably didn't really plug into this until I started actually making the film, but it really is almost therapeutic in the way that it allowed me to draw a connection from my father to myself, and then myself to my son. So for me, that's where the personal kicks in, and it's really important, especially because with my father there was an absence there. I didn't grow up with him beyond the age of 8, and that birthday party that I mentioned in the film is kind of the last celebration prior to moving away, right? And so that's really a thread that runs through the images and the film, and it also highlights for me 3 instances of nostalgia. So we keyed on this a little bit yesterday, but there's a nostalgia for the documentary film that I was never able to make with my father and his march, his music that he created. There's a nostalgia for the Polaroids that I took, and remembering going back and thinking about how those framed my own interests as a filmmaker to become a filmmaker. And then there's also a nostalgia with Atticus's footage now, because as he has developed language, he no longer has this same capacity to access the adventure of perception, if we're going to call it that. Now his thoughts and his feelings and his emotions are encapsulated and expressed by language as opposed to visual image or through the camera. And I have noticed actually that within the last year to year and a half, he's taken less photographs. It's been less of an outlet for him to express himself. And so that's something where now that we have that piece of history dialed in, we can potentially revisit it at some day, hopefully, and talk about, what type of adventure, what type of expressions he was trying to capture in those photographs, even if it may be something that's mysterious to him as well. So,
Thank you. Welcome, Azad. We have Azad Shashmiri with us. Archive of Cracks, 2013-2023. I started asking the artist here on the stage a question about the personal and the connections with the form, the way you imagined and you structured the film. In your case, I feel like it's more about the structure and also putting together bits and pieces of this archive that you've been collecting or finding, or if you can address a little bit this. I hope you can hear us well.
Yeah, hello. I hope that you can hear me well. First of all, thank you very much for watching my film. I hope that I could join you in person, to be present there with you to see the film. And thanks to the music team. Actually, I would like to answer your questions or comments about the film, starting from saying that this movie, this film is all constructed through the images, the personal footages that I collected with different devices that I had in the past 10 years. And I started looking for some specific recordings, and then I arrived at a personal archive that had this potentiality to make a narrative. I would say multiple narratives, but in the time that I was searching for a specific footage, I realized that I had a kind of a specific pattern to film, or to find specific situations to film, or I have some kind of taste in finding objects or images. So it became for me like a personal journey to reflect on the past 10 years. And at some points it was not really easy to deal with my past self, reflected in the images, in the recordings. But then this quality of the archive that tells you things that you probably have never noticed or pay attention to, and then the archives catch you. And I think that they also gave me or told me about the form that I should put them together. Yeah, I think that the form and this quality of the archive, they both together matched in a way that I found myself in a narrative, and I worked on developing that narrative that was already in the archives. I hope that I am clear, but
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, totally. This makes me think of the narration. I think all these films have a common thread of narration, either through voiceover narration or through text, as in your case, Azade. Um, and there's also this relationship that is created within the piece, especially with your piece, Green Before Green, the relationship between the footage, the images that you created and images Atticus created, or Azad, you create this relationship between your present self and your past self. And it's interesting that we don't realize this until the end, close to the end. I feel like you keep wondering, at least I did this when I first watched your film, who is you, right? Who is I, who is you? And always like thinking about this while watching the film. And it was very interesting how you structured it around this conversation between your two selves. So this also involves like bringing narration and bringing yourself into the film. It also involves a performative quality that you need to have, but also you create this persona, this other self for the film. You create this character. And if you can address a little bit, yeah, this creation through the voiceover, through the text, through the narration, through the constructed elements that you bring into the film. How did you create yourself, this persona in the film? Yeah.
Yeah, one of the framing devices is obviously the film Nostalgia by Hollis Frampton, which is mentioned as part of the narration. But in doing research, I was always I always loved that film. I always found it interesting as an experiment, and in terms of capturing photographs to turn around and destroy them, right, and to walk away from the image, if you will. But it was also interesting to kind of jump into the research and read what his intentions were. Specifically, the title of the movie I always found interesting because it was all lowercase and it was nostalgia within parentheses. And in reading about it, it was essentially Frampton's method for dumbing down language or text, if you will. So whether it's text in print or spoken text, that always has a power that almost consumes the image. And when you talk about this relationship between image and language, be it spoken or textual, there's that consideration. And so he was attempting to really limit language's power over the image, yet he's also narrating the images and narrating accounts. That also ties in with the mismatched image and the narration, which is something that is quite important in that equation as well. And so in terms of the narration and how you jump into it, I felt like that kind of came fluidly, just telling the story and laying it down. But then there's also the byproduct or the considerations of, well, what will this do to the image? And, what type of relationship am I inducing by placing this spoken text over this image that was really only meant to be, it's an image as it stands, right? Not an image that I stand there and narrate the meaning of it for you. So, yeah, for me, that was kind of a primary consideration as you jump into that relationship between the narration or the spoken word and the actual images that you're sharing in the film.
Thank you. And I'm also actually curious to see what this did to other people once we open it up to the audience. Penny, would you like to?
Yeah, I mean, in Before Me, I am my voice is the storyteller, weaving together all the narrative of my mother's story. I'm the daughter. I am worked into the sound design in echoes of my voice. Yes, and also elsewhere. And then I perform as well in it. So it's and I'm also the institutional voice because I read the the institutional records as well.
Yes. Yes. Azad?
Yes, very fascinating question. Questioning about performativity. Actually, I am a performance artist. I started with theater all my career, and right now I'm in a dressing room of a theater room here in Berlin. Actually, I had a rehearsal. Yeah, and always thinking and being aware of what is performative, and like in a film that the medium is actually totally different from a stage theater or a performance which is present, and you have like, this direct communication with the audience under one roof or no roof. Um, and this quality, they're very much fascinating for me, working with the images, with the videos, that time and place is somehow fixed there. I would say it's not shared in the same time, and how we can work with the quality of time and place uh, in a medium which fixates somehow these two elements. Um, my challenge was how to make these two narrative, like a visual narrative, and also this written narrative, somehow balanced in a way, and to have the audience with me in the same level. I would say, like we are in the same page. I'm not ahead of you, or you shouldn't feel behind, and we should take each other's hand through this journey. And then be patient at the end. Um, you will you will see you will see the probably the reward that you were patient for. I hope that I'm clear. So I felt that I need this kind of relationship with the audience, which is for me performative as well. Not only um, the relation between these two elements, these two narratives, narration of the spoken language and also the visual, uh, but also the participation of the audience. When the audience is step by step getting into the story, or sometimes maybe it can happen that the audience cannot get into the film or the narrative and then just steps back. That would be very sad for me, but I was thinking about how to make this happen, how to have the whole presence of the audience um, who is not present in the same time and place with me as a person who made, because I'm always used to this kind of situation that we are all together somewhere. Um, yeah, it can be the opening up for the audiences to join us to
Yes,
practice. Yeah.
that's a great way to open up the questions from the audience. And yeah, that's true. That's a great point. Have the audience be invested, right in the viewing, leaning in, just not being passive. So that's what we're doing here, hopefully. So who has questions? Yes, Emily?
Thank you. I wanted to first thank Penny for singing in your film. It's really beautiful. But my question is for Paul. I'm curious, with your eye as like a subject in your son's creation and as the editor and filmmaker, how did you choose to represent yourself and his eyes when you had this huge archive to work with? Were you trying to cover the breadth and like difference in the types of images that he was interested in? Were you trying to find your own interests in what you saw of his? How did you sort of like balance those desires? And I know you had a much smaller archive of your own photographs, but I guess the question extends to like, as an editor working with those two archives, your past self and your son's eyes, how did you choose which of those to represent?
Sure. Well, it's a great question. It's definitely a challenge. I think we spoke about this on the panel yesterday of which images make it and which images don't. And in this case, I think my first decision point was to look at the footage and to say, well, what am I gonna do to this footage? Am I gonna elongate it? How long am I gonna leave still images on? For example, 1 second, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. And my inclination was that I want to do as little to it as possible. And so a lot of the effects that you see there, like the slow-mo, the speed ramping, things like that, were actually things that he had done with the camera. And so that was like, great, there. It might leave your fingerprints off of that. There were little editing tweaks I would do, like just adding or repeating a sound to kind of add tempo to it. But for the most part, the major decisions were to think about the duration of the still images, the duration of the video clips, and then in terms of how he, how he sees me. Like I think it's just for me, it's the sequential aspect of the footage, and I think I learned that most when I was doing the sidecar file for the festival, is that you have to put it into words, his noises. And so the first part is, baby babbles. And then by the third part, it's like, sequential babbles, right? And then, yeah. And then by the last stage, I was like sequential phonemes, right? And so in terms, I'm not a linguist, but like in terms of observing that, I wanted to make sure that was something that we noticed, is that, well, the language is developing here. And then the very last shot is actually him saying Anais, which is his sister. And so for me, that's kind of the stamp of like, okay, you've acquired language now, or for the most part, you've acquired language and you're off, right? You're on your own, a different adventure now, if you will. So that was kind of the considerations there in terms of working with his footage.
Oh, sorry. Well, thank you all. I thought all the films in the program were really great, and it just struck me to like how unique they all were, just both formally and then in a way having that uniqueness in form and content, especially because they're about such personal things. I was kind of wondering, especially because this is a big question for me, in terms of nostalgia or the past or the archive and the personal all mixing together, what you feel like comes next. And and then this is something that I've literally been thinking about for like a few years. And I even asked in another Q&A like 5 years ago, and I got an okay answer. But this seems especially relevant now, and I'm curious because there's multiple people in it, either project wise or just even conceptually. Like, what is like the post nostalgic image or project or consideration, and maybe if that came up in the film that you worked on now, or like and is present in it or not present in it. So I don't know. I guess that goes to everyone, but I don't want to take too much with that.
If anyone wants to respond, any of you could start. Yeah, go ahead, Penny.
In terms of what's next and what my next project really doesn't have much relation really at all to before me, but it does deal with nostalgia, but it's about the Greyhound bus station. I'm from Ottawa, Canada, and the Greyhound bus station has disappeared, shut during COVID, and since then the building has been taken down. And so I've been chronicling that on Super 8, and so it's about loss and displacement, and for this place that was a marker for arrivals and departures, and was a really grubby place that you used to go, come and go from, as a student and whatever, for people who couldn't afford to take the train, you take the bus. And that was so that project, I want to get back into optical printing and go back into, because I'm an experimental filmmaker more these days, so I'll be moving back into that more experimental mode of expression for that project.
Azad, do you wanna?
I would like to talk about nostalgia, but yeah, actually, when I entered the space, it was also the topic, I think, that I missed listening to the fellow filmmakers here present.
What's the next project for you?
Yeah. I just wanted to say that I tried not to be nostalgic when looking at the archives, because for me, becoming nostalgic about something makes you feel a bit, makes you romanticize the materials, or the approach may become sentimental, or so. I always try not to get nostalgic about the materials of the archive. At the same time, I avoid to make my audience feeling nostalgic about something through the images that I'm sharing, I would say. So here there are this terms like progressive nostalgia or radical nostalgia that I'm very much into reading about that. Like how you want, in sake of future, you look back in the past, but you build up some kind of awareness, not exactly nostalgic feelings. So these topics may help to, I don't know, to deal with this feelings, not nostalgically, but also talking about the past, because the past is present, the past is never finished, and these all things that So my next project is also about the archives, but it is a performance project, not a film or video, but yeah, the video project is not about the archive, but the performance project is about the archive. So I have two different projects at hand, and yeah, I'm working with the Iranian dramatic literature, and the plays that have been written over the past 100 years in Iran, and looking back at the characters and the female, especially female characters of those plays, to see how they were written or represented in the plays. Yeah, I can stop.
Okay. Yeah. Paul?
I have to say, I've been to quite a few cities where the Greyhound bus terminal was the most amazing feature in that city, and I find that so many of them are gone now. So I'm excited to plug into that. And yeah, but in terms of what's next, I feel that there's a couple directions. There's the unmade documentary with my father's sheet music that I could always pursue and kind of fill in that that idea. It's interesting that we're screening today because the anniversary of his death was yesterday. We just spent the last week up in northern Michigan, and he received his headstone. So there's, a lot of emotions tied into that. And you wonder, is this something that I should try to finish, or is it something that is best left undone as a feature of our connection, our relationship? But there's also a project where we started. I had a Lomo chemo while Blanca was pregnant with Anais, and we actually shared it with friends and asked them to shoot a roll of film leading up to Anais's birth. And so the idea would be to do some form of film. It was 14 rolls total, but some sort of film that highlights Anais's arrival into the world, and let that kind of be an opportunity to connect with Anais. So
Nice. Said?
Thanks. It is kind of a joke, but I love the fact that your son, as soon as your son learns to speak, you retire him as a filmmaker. It's like that's the end of his career. He's no longer innocent. There's a sense with all your films that the material that you're working with at some point starts telling you how to tell the story, whether narratively or formally. So I'm just curious how all of you facilitate that dialogue with the archive material, with the physical object or the digital archive that you have left.
Azat, you like to?
Yes, thank you for this question. I think the solution for me was to watching these digital materials over and over, and to also to navigate as much as possible. At the same time, I was aware. I think I didn't want. I was aware that, in a way, I'm choosing. I mean, at the end, I'm the one who is choosing the materials. So let's be honest about that. And this is the other way that I would like to build up and show to the audience at the end. I don't know how, to what extent this narrative is constructed, and to what extent it is something that comes from the archives themselves. But what was very much for me the fascinating point was that exactly after finishing this film, I before that I had no concrete decision to move out from the country, but then after that, some things changed, and I moved out from my city and my country, and then I realized that this film was telling something, and this searching for the past also helped me to realize what is ahead in the future. I mean, it came to me in the right time, this necessity of working with these materials and to know more about myself. And then after that, my situation totally shifted. I would say watching all the materials and trying to edit them in different lengths and in different ways. Just playing around, playing with the materials in a way to, and at the same time, you should like, somehow you should be obsessed about this, but yeah, to at the same time, to keep the distance.
Thank you.
I'll go next. I did a lot of research for this project with the specific goal of finding my mother in the archives, which is not, and this was the British archives, and you know, she was a 16-year-old and an individual in, you know, against this larger backdrop. So what I chose were documents that were specific to her, court records. And there's a whole lot of stuff that I simply left out. The footage of Bristol, of the bombing, isn't directly related to her, but tells, you know, her story of what it would have been like to wake up and the, you know, to, as have happened to many people more recently, to have, you know, a city destroyed. But the photograph came later. The photograph came after I'd returned to Canada and was reviewing my research, and I realized I didn't know, I was missing one piece of the court records. So I went back to the Bristol archives, got those court records that said specifically that she had been sent to Grosvenor House in Bristol, because Mum said she'd gone to Bristol, but I couldn't find any trace of an approved school in Bristol. And I found the one in Salisbury. And but I had been in touch with the Salvation Army. And when I discovered she'd been at Grosvenor House, I emailed them and said, oh, you know, my mother happened to have been here at this date. And the social historian sent me the photos. He said, oh, I've got some photos. I did a paper. Here's some photos taken at that time. And I looked at the photo and my mother was in it. And I thought, well, okay. So that's an example of the archive really like, you know, directing me. Like, this is, I had a film and I thought, okay, there it is. I never expected to get an image of my mother. It was all institutional records, very brief court records that were, what's it called? Not annotated, like they were just transcribed in a manner that's fitting for a member of the family. So it wasn't because they couldn't name people or anything like that. So it had to be specific to my mother. So I never saw the actual court records. I just got the archival version of them, whatever it's called. So that was an interesting process to go through.
Yeah, I think we're in an interesting turning point or moment with archives, and to have a single image of a parent is so special. It's so beautiful because of the rarity of it. It's not dissimilar from my own story with my father. Is when he passed, we couldn't find the sheet music of this piece that we had been talking about, and it finally appeared a few years later. But it was so precious, the handwritten sheet music, right? And it popped up finally. And then if you look at my youth, there's a few more pieces in the artifact, right? A few more Polaroids, if you will. And then by the time you get to Atticus, there's stills and videos aplenty, right? And so I feel we're at a turning point now where the technology is allowing an expansion of the archive, and it's getting to the point where these fragments of our lives are going to be dispersed in little areas or little pieces whenever we pass on. And that maybe it's a voice recording, maybe it's an email, maybe it's an image or a series of items on your phone. So I think that's an interesting component, talking about trying to make specific decisions from the archive and what to choose, that complicates it even more because there's so much more material. And then in my post-human brain or mindset, I feel that we will eventually arrive at a point where the technology will allow some type of recorded image and sound from the moment we're born until the moment we die. And then that will be our personal archives that will pass along to our ancestors, right? And it sounds silly now. I'm like, oh, why would we do that? Well, as we've seen with technology, sometimes, we let it impose itself on us. And I feel that that's something that's highly probable as we move on into this era of where we're working with computers and technology and elongated archives, if you will.
Okay, thank you all. Our time is up for this Q&A, but I invite you to continue the conversations outside or on the way to the CU Boulder campus, where we'll go for the artist reception at 4 p.m. So please join us for that and continue the conversations. Thank you. Thank you very much.
The reception and the conversation is in Atlas Building B2, but also there's a conversation tomorrow morning on performance and performativity.
Yes, that's true. Thank you for reminding me. Tomorrow morning, we have another conversation with a few artists that will be present. We also have a performance that starts at 9:30 a.m. Jason Fox will perform our American Glass Factory here. So please come at 9:30. We'll have a 50-minute performance and then a conversation with a few artists that are here in attendance. So thank you all. Thank you, Azad. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Penny.
Thank you, Lucy.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.